I guess I've been doing film, or some semblance of film. I suppose when I sort of started doing stuff, just hacking around, I was probably 12 or 13 shooting Super 8, and then in high school we started shooting like home video, and
right.
Shooting our own little movies on home video, and that was kind of it. I've been doing it. I've been sort of shooting stuff and cutting stuff, and since a pretty young age. I went straight out of high school into film school, and and it kind of just from there. I mean, there's never been any sort of questioning period of like, what am I going to do after high school, or what am I going to do with my life, or whatever. It's always had a pretty clear idea of what I was going to do,
Well, at least you were lucky enough to be able to make your dream a reality then.
Well, I guess so. I mean, I had it's funny because I had a lot of friends. I guess I don't know. I just sort of stuck to my guns, I suppose, because I had a lot of friends that wanted to direct as well, and friends that I went to film school with, and they went off to work after film school on, as PAs or whatever on other people's sets and stuff like that, and made reasonably good money for, like, say, if you were 21 or 22, made pretty good money. And I worked in, like, coffee shops, and just made my own short films and stuff like that.
So, were you always a fan of horror films?
Oh, always, yeah. Always big fan of horror films.
Any particular ones?
Particular ones, well, when I was young, when I was, like, younger, it was all Halloween and The Exorcist and like one of the it was kind of funny. I was telling Corey this afternoon that one of my favorite sort of movies that sort of traumatized me when I was little was Black Christmas, the Bob Clark film that was shot here on the U of T campus.
Yeah, I know somebody who was in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it when I was like 10, right? And it totally scared me. And it was really horror films for me were very like that sort of love-hate sort of relationship, because I was very, very afraid of
right.
When I was little, and the only way that I could get past kind of being scared was to sort of figure out how they were made.
Right.
And because by imagining or knowing how they were made, it sort of kind of took some of the the mystery or the scariness out of them, I suppose. And
that's actually more common than you would think, because I one time interviewed, actually this never got published, unfortunately. It was a good interview, but I interviewed this guy. You may have heard of him, Gord Smith. He's a special effects guy.
Yeah, totally.
And he told me that the reason he got into doing what he did was that his, I don't know if he'd want me telling you this, but just between you and me,
yeah.
his dad, I think it was his dad, died of leukemia.
Right.
And he developed this horrible phobia of anything to do with blood.
Right.
And so in order to get over that, because it got to such proportions that he had to go into therapy and everything for years, that he decided to introduce himself to blood. And he started by fake blood to work himself up to real blood, and interspersed in this, he found out a new way to make fake blood and to make fake skin that everyone had been searching for and nobody had been able to develop until him. And it was just the weirdest way. I expected when I interviewed him to say, oh, so were you always interested in special effects and blood? He goes, no, I had no interest in doing this at all. It just happened.
That's so funny.
So it actually does happen. There are some people, especially with the horror film genre, where people are sort of working out their own traumas sometimes,
Yeah, it's true. Hey, I've got another effects friend who does similar sort of stuff, who is actually the sight of real blood, he would faint.
Yeah.
When like in any sort of kind of situation of trauma or whatever, like a car accident or coming across someone who's he's like the worst person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Dave, buddy, you do this for a living, or you're around this stuff, and he's like, just can't handle it.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird, eh?
Yeah, it's very weird.
Now, because you've grown up from what it sounds like with the horror films of the early 80s, late 70s, and so forth, you've probably seen the films such as American Werewolf in London, The Howling, which have werewolves in them. And I'm guessing that because every director comes on a film with some sort of idea, some sort of vision, what was your vision to make this look different and seem different, especially in the transformation sequences from those films?
Well, I think that, I guess, from the get-go, I knew that I wanted to make, when Ginger Snaps was just a little tiny idea, from the get-go, like a horror film. And I guess I had always been interested in doing a sort of a metamorphosis sort of movie.
Right.
And when I started thinking about the werewolf genre, I guess I started thinking about the fact that that it really hadn't been done that well all that many times. There's kind of I think there's really a handful of good werewolf films out there, and most of the good ones tend to be the older ones, like American Werewolf in London or like Howling. And I guess I knew from the beginning that if I was going to kind of jump into doing something like that it was going to have to be fairly original. And so I started thinking about the werewolf and started thinking about kind of basically just deconstructing the myth to a certain degree. Now, by just making girls be the sort of the protagonists in the film, that was quite a bit right there. I was this script was written even before American Werewolf in Paris came out, where there was a kind of a female werewolf in that. And so when we were writing it, I was like, well, I don't think I've seen sort of a female werewolf be the lead part in a film before. So, but then I started thinking, it's got to be more than that, and started thinking about the myth of the werewolf, and kind of decided that we would sort of bring our own sort of spin to that, and we would basically take all the werewolf, the sort of the typical sort of Hollywood werewolf rules, and kind of say, that's what happens in the movies. This is what would happen if it were real. And if it were real to me, it would be more of like a biological infection. It would be something that it would be like an infection that sort of grew from the inside out through your bloodstream and would be able to be passed on through transfer of blood or transfer of body fluids. And so it would be something that you could say pass on during unprotected sex, like a sexual, like an STD.
Right.
And that became, and that was good for me, because I was looking for things to connect. I was always looking for things to connect my adolescent girl, like looking for teen subjects to kind of connect, to make this all sort of one big metaphor. That, because Ginger, she kind of goes through, starting from the moment she's infected, through the next 28 days, her body changes. And at first, the changes are sort of eerily similar to what any normal adolescent girl would go through. And then they become a little more amplified than that, and then they become more like mutations. And the thing that, when I started thinking about it, the thing that scared me the most was the idea of a 15-year-old girl watching her body mutate, and that to me was where the kind of the horror of this film came from, was the sort of the biological horror of seeing that sort of slow, sort of disintegrating transformation, rather than a transformation that occurs like by the light of the full moon, and you run around and kill a bunch of people and then turn back into a normal. This was like one slow, indelible sort of transformation, and that when I and you know, one of the things that I suppose, if I was going to say, I was, you know, if there was any, you know, any comparisons or influences that I could draw on for that, I would say, you know, like the Fly is a really good example of that, and I really love that idea that the transformation actually occurs over the length of the film.
You know, it's interesting that you said that, because if you hadn't said that, I was going to say that, because I've interviewed Cronenberg a couple of times, and it seems like he was one of the first people to do that, whereas everything, you know, and the same with the Wolfman, although I like the original Wolfman, it's sort of a very quick transformation. Boom, he's the Wolfman, he's got the face of a wolf and hairy hands, and then in American Werewolf, they had it, you know, the whole body transformed into like an animal thing.
Yeah.
So Cronenberg kind of did that with The Fly. Instead of just face of Fly, hand of Fly, even though the original Fly was a great movie, which I love to watch again and again, he did it as a slowly metamorphosing disease.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was all ready to draw that comparison with what you were talking about.
Well, which is scary. It's like The Fly was like as though, you know, watching yourself come apart. You know, like as if you had like leprosy or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that like a lot of people kind of live with. Not necessarily leprosy, but any sort of really, you know, debilitating terminal disease. You know. And it's a pretty scary scary sort of prospect, and
I guess also the whole idea of, you know, the 28-day transformation is similar to the menstrual cycle in the girls as well, right?
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, I think Ginger's sort of changes are when I started thinking about, when we started really kind of going, wow, yeah, that's really cool. What a cool idea. It started just, you know, the more we thought about it, the more interesting things we could sort of could find. You know, it was like the lunar cycles and menstrual cycles, and, you know, how girls feel about growing hair on their body, and, you know, Ginger developing new appetites, let's say, and, you know, experiencing, you know, total serious hormonal ups and downs, and that, all that kind of stuff was, you know, I really love the idea that at first these changes have answers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That people have answers. They can say, well, you know, you're just becoming a young woman, you know, rather than go, oh my God, yes, that's in fact not the case. You're becoming a monster.
So it takes everybody a while to catch on that this isn't normal.
It does, including the two sisters. I mean, they know that they do know that they were attacked by something, but the older sister is very the Ginger, who was the one that was attacked, obviously is quicker to kind of go, you know what, I'm fine. People are telling me I'm fine. Let's just forget about that night. You know, that's not what this is about. You know, and it's the younger sister who just won't let it go and believes that
yeah,
her sister is.
Now, I wanted to address also, you know, we were talking about the whole hormonal allegory. But the way this film portrays teenagers in general, I'd like to talk about, because I don't know if you were involved in it at the time, but there was and I've asked a few people about this just to get everyone's different take on it. There was a bit of a ridiculous controversy before this film was even cast, saying, oh, several casting directors refused to work on this because it's going to be another teenage slasher flick, and everybody's, basically it seemed to me like everyone was very paranoid because it was right after that Colorado crap.
Right.
And whenever something like that happens, you know, parents seem to not want to blame themselves as parents. You know, they don't want to say, oh no, it's our problem because we didn't bring him up right. It's got to be some outside force that's doing this, some poison in our society that makes kids do this.
Yeah, that's right. So
I wonder how you reacted when you came on board with this project with this sort of thing hanging over your head.
Well, I mean, I've been, the thing is, I've been on board this project for the last 5 years.
Oh, so you were here for all that?
Yeah, well, I was, you know, I was the one who, you know, initially came up with the idea for the story, and we developed the script kind of together. I didn't write it, but I've been here the entire time. And so this I guess the little controversy that happened, it would have happened like kind of in April, I guess, April or May, was it was just, to me, people looking for press, and it just happened to be on someone's desk at the wrong time, and to me it became very silly, because it was basically a lot of people who hadn't even read the script complaining about the script.
Yeah, in any kind of complaints, that's always the way. It's always the people who haven't seen the movie or don't know that are complaining the loudest. But it was weird for me to read it. I saved clippings from that, because I knew, as soon as I saw it, I said, well, I know I'm going to be assigned to this movie sooner or later, so I better keep these clippings. But I found it very interesting that this was, as far as I remember, the first Canadian film that's ever had something like this said about it.
It is kind of true. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it very well could be. And it's not because, certainly the film is the film is a very aggressive, out there kind of film. In terms of the violence, I had a really hard time associating it with something like Columbine, mainly just because, I just kind of go, I was just kind of going, well, it's a monster film. It's about a monster. And aside that, just a lot of what was written, it was completely inaccurate. And to me, the violence in the film is, there certainly is some more violent sequences, but it's not, it certainly has nothing to do with sort of premeditating and killing, and it's a little more about not being able to control yourself, and it was a little bit, it was kind of like in a lot of cases, to me, what I had decided after reading and hearing about what was going on, had decided that what was offending people, what in the script was offending people was not the violence, in fact, at all, that it was the biological issues.
Well,
the violence was just a good scapegoat and the right time.
It's interesting that always takes place. Like when Cronenberg did Crash, he told me the same thing. In England, they didn't want to admit that it was the sex they had a problem with, so they said it was a violent film, and they made people think that it was so much more violent than it was, when in fact there was very little violence in the film.
Yeah.
They do the same with whenever they've complained about comic book, sex comics. They never complain about the fact that the same people who won't print a certain comic because of its sexual content, sometimes are the same people who print gun catalogs, or there's always some connection where people are okay with excessive violence, but sex they still have a problem with.
Yeah.
And I've never quite understood why one should be, worse, why sex should be worse than violence, but...
I know, and it's not, the film is actually not even all that sexual, but it certainly deals with sort of very specific kind of female sort of issues, and some that are really, really are a little bit, I suppose, a lot of people would think we're a bit on the icky side,
Yeah, but there is also the, I guess, not having seen the script, but from what you described, the primal thing of when someone turns into an animal, they become more animal-like and have animal-like urges and that sort of thing.
That's true, yeah. There is definitely a sexual element to it, because Ginger becomes a very sexual animal and sort of confuses sexual appetites for killing appetites, and that line sort of between sex and killing sort of, gets a little bit blurred, I suppose, at some points. But it's, I think handled in a more sort of dark yet humorous kind of fashion. And the violence is there, but the violence certainly has to be there, because it's, it's what I suppose becoming a werewolf is about. But
and I think also people seem to get upset more at black comedy horror films than straight horror films.
Oh, yeah, very much, yeah.
Because
don't get me wrong. This film is definitely not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. Like it doesn't need to be. It really, if the film, I guess, winds up being, certainly my mother is not going to like this film. Film winds up being offensive to some people, well, then it is, But I think but I also don't think that it's going to convince people to go out and kill people either, because it's just not like that, It's like saying something like American Werewolf in London convinced people to go out and kill each other, It can't be. Like, it just can't. You're not going to be able to watch the film and think that. I just can't. I don't think so, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's doesn't it seem that there always has to be something, whenever something like that happens, there has to be something that comes along right at that time that becomes a scapegoat, something to blame it on.
Yeah.
Now, do you ever get, as a, I don't know if you even think about this, do you ever even get thoughts about, geez, what about the violence in the media? Is there too much violence, and that sort of thought go through your head ever, or?
Well, sure, but at the same time, I think that, I suppose you're responsible for yourself, and you're responsible for what you put up on screen, and I suppose, I only do things. I don't necessarily like to do things just for shock value or do them for, just to elicit a response. Usually they have to be part of a bigger picture. You have to be doing things because it makes sense in the story, or because it makes sense for those characters, or it changes the story somehow. And it all has to be sort of part of one bigger picture, and it's not just things that are thrown in there because it'll just for exploitation value or something like that, This script was extremely well thought out, and and a lot of time was spent on it, and there isn't anything in there that isn't in there for a purpose. Even if it is big, or if it is shocking, or if it is, it always has a reason in there. So that's all I would say about wanting to be a responsible filmmaker, is to tell a story, and to make sure that and to make sure that you've got a story to tell, because so many horror films these days that I see, just there isn't even a fucking story.
Yeah. Is not the case.
And that's I think I hope where Ginger excels. I hope it's the extremely smart casting and the incredible sort of caliber of the actors and the incredible caliber of the script. And if kind of that's it, I mean, that's enough, because that you don't see.
And it must have been fun working with, a young, energetic cast like that.
Oh, it was great. It was totally great. I mean, the girls were, unbelievable. Both Emily and Katie were like finds. I mean, they're such talented people that you don't have to. You really just, we rehearsed a lot.
Stage prosthetics, so occasionally it gets confusing. I don't even know anymore. It's all like, I haven't seen the sun in 2 weeks, and it's all kind of congealed into like this one big blob, and I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. I don't know what stage we're doing. They just glue some stuff on me, and then I go. I don't even try and keep track anymore.
And so you're on camera. Both of you are probably on camera like most of the time, right? So you probably work the most hours of any of the cast members, don't you?
Yeah, Emily does.
Yeah.
There's a few scenes, anywhere from like 12 to 20 hours a day. It's really
So
fun.
how are you holding out? How long have you been doing this for with that kind of schedule?
7, 8 weeks. 7
Oh my
weeks.
God.
Yeah, we haven't been doing nights all along.
No, we've only been doing nights for the last like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Right. So you were, and I guess when you were doing the days, you also had to get up really early to be made up some of those days and sit in the makeup chair for a couple hours.
Prosthetics takes about 3 or 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how is it taking it off?
Takes about an hour and a half to get them off.
And do you scream a lot and swear and?
No, I scream when I take.
Bitch.
Shut up! Shut up!
She looks
Get
so
you.
sweet, but in reality, after an hour in the
You're
makeup
gonna
chair.
get a punch in the head later when no one's around.
okay.
Well, with Boris Karloff and Frankenstein, they said when they took those pieces off his eyelids, you heard him say some words you'd never heard him say normally. So.
Well, I scream when I take the clothes because the blood that they put on me, blood glues to my skin.
Right.
It glues the clothes to my skin, and it's like glued on there, so I have to rip it off, and I will stand in the corner of the studio and scream when I'm ripping these clothes off because it hurts a lot.
And you have to. Does this happen like almost every day, or?
Yeah, today I only have a little bit of blood on me. Usually I have lots.
Wow.
It's basically an everyday.
It's an everyday thing for me.
Well, that's a good. It's a good to get this kind of stuff over with early in your career, right? Theoretically.
It's in my contract from now on. I never have any more.
Now tell me a little bit your background, what acting jobs you've done, each of you, before this. So I'll start with you, Emily.
Lots of TV movies and
Right.
series, and I did a Canadian series for 2 seasons when I was a lot younger. Haven't really done too much recently, actually.
Right. Is this your first horror movie?
No, I did Stephen King's It.
Oh,
when I was
really?
13.
I saw that. Wow. Yeah, it was a long time ago, eh? Yeah, oh, so you must have met John Ritter. I interviewed him once.
Yes.
When he had nails sticking out of his face in Bride of Chucky.
Oh, really?
And the guy who did the makeup on this did that to him. They actually put the nails in his face just before I talked to
Oh,
him.
really?
Yeah, he told me that. Paul Jones, that's right, yeah.
And I did an episode of X-Files too.
Oh,
so I
great.
can kind of sympathize with Katie having the prosthetics.
Yeah.
And that corrosive.
Well, you were like an alien in that?
I was actually quadruplets called the Nephilim, and they were half angel. They weren't meant to be born, so this sort of soul collector was coming around and burning their eyes out and taking their souls off to heaven.
Who doesn't, right? I wanted to ask also both of you, you're probably aware of this ridiculous controversy that was going on a few months ago about this movie, right? There was, at least here, I don't know if it was covered so much in the States, but at least here, because it was coming from here, there's a big thing in the papers about, it's just another teen slasher movie, which obviously I can see that's not what it is. At that time, nobody had read the script probably, nobody really knew, and they were saying all these casting directors had turned down, they refused to work on it because of the subject matter, and this was right after that big Colorado shooting thing. Did you guys get any backlash from that? Were you affected by that at all? Were you thinking of that when you first took on the roles? Or?
They didn't tell us about that. It didn't come up until a little while after we'd been here. So we didn't know anything about it when we were auditioning or doing screen test or anything.
I don't know if it's going to come up now because maybe they've sort of gone on to something else.
I think it was I don't know too much about it, but I think it was just, the people who were reporting on it had read the script. They had gotten information like third hand.
Yeah, and it was also the timing. I think people were just really paranoid and uptight at that time about anything to do with teenagers and violence and stuff. As people of that age group yourself, how do you feel about the violence in movies that are in all the theaters, on videos, on television? Do you think any teenagers are affected by that?
Well, I think that they probably are, and I don't really like violence myself, unless there's a reason for it.
Sure.
And I think it's the violence in Ginger Snaps is justified because of the metaphorical content.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I think what people really get upset about, personally, like I don't like the sort of slasher films where it's like there's teenagers having sex and then they get an ice pick in the head. Like, what is that telling people? Like Dawn of the Dead, where zombies are eating human flesh. I think, hey, that's what zombies do, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, you're a werewolf. What werewolves do, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You know. So.
I have a reason for my.
That's right. That's right.
insanity.
You're totally justified in your actions, so don't you worry. Now, and is it so? Oh, yeah, you're playing sisters, obviously, both of you. Mimi Rogers played your mother. How was that working with her?
I didn't have very many days with her. She was really nice.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
She was great.
Yeah.
She's a great actress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great person.
Great. Okay. Now, what do you think about the? I'd like to ask you about the subtext as well. The screenwriter Karen, that's right, was telling me a lot about how she came up with this sort of these metaphors for like teen angst and going through puberty and going through all these physical transformations that well, boys too, but especially girls go through at a certain age, and equating that with the transformation into the werewolf and all that. How do you feel about it? Do you think it really addresses teen issues and teen feelings?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it definitely does. I mean, it's the mood swings, it's the pressure of like fitting in or whatever.
Sure.
Into popularity and whatever. It's your body changing. You don't know what the fuck is happening, and no one's telling you. And it's all of it. I think it's totally.
Yeah. And sort of also the secretive aspect of not being able to necessarily talk about everything.
Yeah, not wanting to talk about it, not wanting anyone to kind of find out, being embarrassed about it.
And also, I mean, specifically for women, this movie is female-centered, and so it really engages with some of the issues of your body rebelling against you and turning into a woman, which in our society isn't exactly the greatest thing to be, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
And how about between the mother and daughter? Is there conflict there? Well, especially you, I guess.
Well, we hate our mother. We hate her.
Oh, really? Eh?
We hate her life. We hate her. We don't want to have anything to do with her.
What aspects of her character is it that you guys hate?
Well, she's so. I think we're so weird, and
she's too normal.
She's so perfect and normal and like cheerful and happy. And she wears. How do you explain her?
Well, she's a collaborator.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the big patriarchal scheme of things.
She's like.
She's a cog in the wheel, the corporate wheel.
Not that we necessarily have that level of consciousness, because we don't at all.
We just hate her. And
we
so
just
we're
don't
all
want to become
weird
her.
and
Right.
dark, and we try everything we can to be complete
To freak her
opposite
out
of
and stuff.
And yeah.
And does she react to that, or does she just sort of go, oh, they're just kids being kids kind of deal?
She's in denial.
Yeah, she's in
Totally
denial.
in
She's
denial.
totally
Like
in
real
denial.
moms.
Yes, she is. I think a lot of people will relate.
Yeah. And how does she? So she doesn't believe that you're going through this werewolf thing. Is it plain to everyone but her, or what?
No one really knows what's going on.
No one really knows.
But I mean, if she had any kind of connection with her daughter at all,
She would know something was wrong.
Yeah.
But she doesn't.
Well, that's
so.
another thing, equating back to what I was talking about. This thing about these Colorado shootings and all this. It's always the same thing. They try and blame something from the outside, the media, the violence, or society, or whatever. They never come right to, if you were watching your kid, you would see they're going through changes.
They do.
They gave all kinds of signs that they were going to do something like this.
Yeah.
Where were you?
But so many kids show those signs. So many kids
That's
show those
true.
signs, and not all of them go in and shoot.
No, that's true. That's very true. I mean, there's lots of. Well, now it's like even here. I don't know this whole trench coat mafia thing. People are being like expelled for wearing a trench coat. It's like it's not the idea of what this
They
trench
need
coat
something
now
to blame.
represents. It's just a trench coat,
Right. And that's one thing I really like about the script in Ginger Snaps is that it doesn't blame anything. Like I throw around the word patriarchy just for lack of a better word,
Right.
but this script doesn't ever name the enemy. Like it's not the men that's a problem, or it's not like
The kids at school or the parents.
It's not society. It's not anything internal, just internal. It's sort of ambiguous, and I like that because it's realistic, I think.
Yeah, because everything isn't all cut and dried and explained in real
That's
life
right. It's
anyway.
more complex than that.
Sure. So you think there'll be a lot for teenage and particularly teenage girls to relate to in your two characters?
Completely.
I think so.
There's
I totally relate to these
Yeah.
girls.
I mean, there's like I said, the puberty, going through that, being all tripped out, your body's doing weird things, the fitting in, the sisters, the parents rebel against the parents, against the mother, everything. It's independent female
and not
characters.
but they're independent, but they're like hurting at the same time, because there isn't any sort of image of like femininity or what have you, that they or femaleness that they can they can hold that sort of reflects their individuality and reflects their subjectivity. There's just all these like stereotypes in this
Right.
movie besides the two girls. Like everyone else is just a stereotype, and it's like, well, who am I?
Yeah.
Because that's like generally what our media reflects: stereotypical female characters.
Sure.
Totally.
Sure.
Which, yeah.
And in fact, a lot of I'm not supposed to use the word actresses, I'm told anymore. Female actors have said that there aren't a lot of good roles for women,
There aren't.
and
It's so true.
and
It's
even
like
at your age,
sex
you still say that, right?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Because you hear that more from older women, but you would think girls of your age, there's tons of roles for them, but that doesn't mean they're good ones, right?
They're not. They suck.
It's
I was
either
about
the
to
sex
drop out of
pot,
acting
yep.
before I got this job.
Really, eh?
Because I was so
Any really specific questions, so we'll just chat.
No problem.
Do you want to first tell me about your background, where you grew up and so forth?
I started in England about 12 years ago now, professionally. I've been doing makeup since I was like a very wee child.
Right.
I started with a guy called Bob Keane, Image Animation. So I worked on Nightbreed, did all the Hellraiser movies, based at Pinewood Studios, and that's pretty much where I got all my training. I started with him as a runner,
Right.
and worked my way up to being able to supervise movies on my own, and then did a couple of features in Canada and married a Canadian. She didn't want to move to England, so I thought, oh, fuck it, I'll move to Canada.
Right.
And I've been here about 6 years now, coming up to 6.5 years.
Wow.
And I did Earth Final Conflict for 2 years, with all the prosthetics on there. And then I did FX series. I did The Bride of Chucky the year before.
Oh,
that.
I covered that.
Yeah, so it was my photo that was in Cinevex, me and one of my guys gluing on John Ritter's face.
Right.
I wasn't.
Oh, you did the.
I did the nails.
Yeah,
I did all the prosthetics.
I interviewed him right after you had done that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty fun. He was hilarious, actually. It's a shame because the magazine I work for cut out most of that interview, but it was actually a pretty funny interview. I still have it on tape.
He's such
But those were
guy.
they were pretty realistic looking,
Thank you.
especially when you got on the screen, because
Well,
I saw
it was-
the scene through the monitor and it looked realistic.
Thank you. That's a nice compliment.
And then that guy, just to get the spelling right, that guy you were talking about, Bob Keane.
Bob Keane, K-E-E-N,
Okay,
and his company was Image
like
Animation.
Peachy Keen.
That's the one.
Now, let's talk about the particular effects that you've done for this project. Now, do you do just the makeup effects, or are you into the other larger stuff as well?
I was given the script really early on, about 3 months before principal photography, and it showed a young lady being bitten by a wolf and then changing into a werewolf and then becoming a creature at the end that's very similar to what attacked her in the beginning, plus many other effects as well. So if there was a movie that I had to work on that would test every department of what I try and supply to producers, it's this. I've had to do prosthetics on an actor, I've had to do animatronic creature suits, I've had to do dead animals, I've had to do gore wounds like prosthetics, blood and guts, I've had to do fake body parts, so I've had to pretty much do everything.
So it's a real tour de force for you.
It really
in
is,
your
yeah.
field.
It's like, for me, it's a real. It's a great story, but also it's packed full of effects, which I've done. So not only can the audience enjoy what's going on screen, they can also enjoy what I've done on screen, which hopefully they will.
Now, the transformation sequences would seem to be a key thing in this movie, as in any werewolf movie.
Well-
How have you endeavored to make them look different than, say, an American Werewolf or The Howling?
It's not really. It's a really different twist on werewolf transformations, because the whole movie is a transformation. She gets bitten by a creature at the beginning, which is a fully developed werewolf. You very, very briefly see. You're not really sure what attacked her. That gets killed very early on, and then the whole movie is a transformation. So every time you see Ginger, she's slightly different. So what we had to do was start with an actress who's very pretty and keep that attractive, that aesthetic look, but still make her
Frightening.
transformed. And that was the hardest part, was finding a line between having an attractive person and also trying to get to the look we had to get by that point in the story.
Right.
And I think we've managed it. We managed it through a 3-stage prosthetic transformation. Plus we had a mechanical tail that she grows at various points in the movie. She has various sized nails that you see each time. She has various sized dentures. She has contact lenses. She has body appliances. So she goes through the whole gamut. The Katie that plays Ginger, she goes through the whole gamut of prosthetics, makeup. We did a whole body cast on her and a face cast, a hand cast, and the whole 9 yards. and she's been
They
great
sort of
to
did
work
that in Wolf too. They had it very gradual as opposed
Exactly,
to...
it's a lot more like that than it is the Howling American
Right.
Werewolf, I don't think the audience would mind that too much, because all transformations are off camera.
Right.
Because what happens is a very quick kind of a transformation at the end when she goes from stage 3 prosthetics to the full animatronic creature. It's a very fast transformation, all done with quick cuts and
So
flashing
you sort
lights.
of lead up to that in
You
sort
don't
of
actually see
suspense.
her body change shape on camera. It's
Right.
all off camera, which I think works better for the story. It's not really about that. It's about her and how she feels about it, rather
Right.
than what she's actually going through.
Now, where does in the case that you're saying in this particular project, you've got your foot in all of it for the effects. How do you, I don't know how to explain this. How do you decide where the makeup or the prosthetics ends and the CGI or other types of effects begin?
Well, we decided early on, the producer, the director, and myself, how we would accomplish the effects. And we knew from the start that we didn't want to do a computer graphic creature. We'd seen it done a couple of times before. We didn't have the budget for that. And we're kind of all fans of the old horror movies, American Werewolf, The Howling. And we tend to think that it actually looks better. You know, if you set a certain style into your movie, if you stick a CG creature on the end, it may or may not work. We didn't want to take that chance. So we have Nick Nolan, who's a very accomplished stunt guy and performer, inside our costume. We've had him do all the body movements as well as doing very complicated aerial jumps and movements supported from the ceiling on a wire track that Shelley Cook, the stunt coordinator, has been supervising. So not only does he walk into frame and walk out of frame, he's able to jump 10 feet from point A to point B in the
Right.
costume, which I think
Which you didn't see in American
No,
Werewolf.
you didn't. I mean,
They barely showed the full figure at all.
Exactly, which was always the plan. I mean, American Werewolf is the movie that made me realize that I could do this for a living. So for me, it's like full circle to be able to do a werewolf movie,
Right.
and use that to inspire me to create, I'll be happy if I get within 1/10 of the effects that are on that
So
show.
this is a really exciting project for you then.
It is. I was doing, I've been pretty much doing aliens for the last 2 years. FX the series had a couple of episodes that had aliens in, but Earth Final Conflict, I was doing all the Talons and all the Squirrels for that show for 2 years, and that takes a lot out of you. So to be able to do a show that really, we want dead bodies, we want werewolves, we want dead animals, we want everything. It really was a good jump to go from that to this, and all of a sudden I was an effects guy again. I wasn't just a makeup guy on set, I was the effects supervisor, and I felt like I was actually giving something to the movie rather than just being hired to supply something.
Sure.
Which,
Now, as you say that since American Werewolf and that era was instrumental in you wanting to get into this, was Rick Baker himself an influence for you?
Yeah, Rick, I've never met Rick Baker. I look forward to hopefully meeting him one day, but he's really the guy. He just seemed like a really down-to-earth guy who was incredibly talented. There was no pretensions. He wasn't a businessman.
Right.
He wasn't out to make a lot of money. He just wanted to do good effects. And that's all I've ever wanted to do. It's the only job I've ever done. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And I hope I'll be doing it forever. But yeah, he
in turn would write stuff about Jack Pierce and his influence on him and so forth. So it carries on each generation.
It really does. I don't think I'm influencing anybody to get into the industry. I know there's a few guys who've come up to me at conventions and gone, "Hey, you're Paul Jones," but it's pretty far and
well, as time goes on, that will happen.
Well, maybe. I think, unfortunately, because of computer graphics, I think the heyday of makeup effects has really peaked. I think this is pretty much it. I don't think you're going to be seeing in the next 10 years a whole new generation of effects guys.
I don't know if, you would know this better than me being in the industry, but I still see a lot of people, I go on a lot of these sets, who are doing a lot of things with puppetry, with makeup, that really, maybe if CGI gets more and more advanced, it will take away a lot of that. But I still hear people saying, for the type of movements they want, for the believability, it's better to have makeup, puppetry, animatronics rather than computer graphics.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying that CG is going to take the work away from us. I'm just saying that there was definitely a generation of effects guys that came in the late 70s, early 80s that influenced myself when I started in like 85, 86. So, and a lot of my peers back in England and people of my age have their own shops now. What I'm saying is, I think in the next 10 years, I don't think there's going to be many people coming in and setting up their own shops in, say, 10 years' time. I think the guys that are already established right now are just going to keep working. Because I don't think there's going to be an increase of work. I think the work is going to stay the same. And I think, I predict in, say, 15 years, there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 big shops in LA, and that's going to be it. I mean, whether or not that'll happen, but I see it definitely going, because Rick has a huge shop, Steve Johnson has a huge shop, Stan Winston has a huge shop. There's a lot of other small shops, and I know that they are competing against each other for what's left over.
There's a guy in town here called Gord Smith.
Yes.
Who has done amazing stuff with foam latex and things like that. So he's actually in demand for Hollywood films and that. So I mean, there are a few guys in and around Toronto that I've talked to who seem to be doing really good stuff and are in demand in Hollywood films. But yeah, you could be right about that. Maybe there won't be a lot of new guys springing up. They'll just build on the teams that are producing now.
Exactly, because I mean, if I hadn't have come to town with the resume I had from England, I would have found it hard breaking into the industry, because I've met a lot of guys in town who are very, very talented guys.
Really?
Who just, because they haven't got the resume, they find it hard to actually get a feature. They can work for other people, but to get a feature themselves, producers want to hire established people. And that's really the hardest thing, because there's already established people now, whereas like 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't the big shops, so the producers have to go to somebody and say, can you do this? And he goes, yeah, sure, and they'd set up their workshop because of that.
Yeah.
And when Rick did American Wolf, he had like 6 guys working for him. Now he's got 60.
And also because of the prevalence of people like that, they started using more effects in film, so that sort of built. The films started changing too.
And now it's getting to a point where effects are like, I mean, I've been quoted a couple of times, especially with Earth, of doing standard prosthetics. And standard prosthetics is a little bit demeaning in my mind, because you still have to be an artist. You have to sculpt it, paint it. You don't have to press a button and buy a software program. That's a different kind of art. But to slate prosthetics as being standard now, it's a real shame, because we're still striving to achieve new things. We're still trying out new materials. We're still achieving things that weren't done maybe 2-3 years ago even. We're still pushing the envelope of what we've done with prosthetics, but I find a lot of producers still calling it standard prosthetics, which is a real shame, because there's a lot of art in what we do.
Now, at the greatest point for the facial makeup, say on the character of Ginger, how long does it take to make her up?
Well, different stages have different application times. The first stage is very, very subtle. It's just essentially just tiny pieces on the corners of her eyes, just to give her just change her bone structure a little bit. That's like maybe an hour.
Right.
Then stage 2 is 3 hours, and stage 4 with the full chest is like 5 hours. And that's a full face piece with gloves and a full chest and a mechanical tail. So it gets fairly elaborate, but not as elaborate as the final wolf creature.
Now, how many people are on your team?
At one point in the movie, I had 15 crew members, all working on different projects in the show. But right now, I have 4 main on-set people. I call the Wolf team, or the Wolf Pack, because they do just the costume.
Right.
Whenever there's a makeup, I usually have myself, an assistant, or maybe another artist if I need them. But I try and do as much of the makeups I can, because I still like what I do.
Right.
And there's no point in me sitting in the workshop twiddling my thumbs and having somebody else do a makeup when I enjoy doing it. So I try and do as much of the set time, and anything that stops me from doing that is just scheduling, just finishing stuff for the next day's shooting.
Is it, are the people sort of contracted out, or do you have these people in your employ?
Everybody in Toronto is freelance. There isn't enough work to be constant. It's really a state of mind, because when I first started in Toronto, I worked for 3 years non-stop. Literally each job would overlap the next. So I had a bunch of guys that would stay with me for a long time. And then it got to a point when I was losing my mind. So I had to take some time off. And then when I took time off, obviously I'd lose my crew to other companies. And then when I started back up again, it was like, okay, are you available? No. Okay, you available? Yes. So they'd come back and work for me. I don't really have anybody permanent, because because personalities, unless you have a business partnership, it's always best to keep people moving around, because that way they can go and experience new things, they can go and learn new things. But there is enough people in town to set up a fairly large shop at any one time, depending on the amount of work. I know
now, when something like that happens, where you've taken a break from it, and then it's hard to put your team back together, is it hard then to get the good people that you want at that point?
Yeah, a few people weren't available for this show in particular, and I was left with a lot of very talented talented people, but not very experienced people. So what I had to do was actually fly in a couple of my colleagues from England and get them a work visa to work specifically on the show. And they came over and did a lot of work on the wolf suit. They were like the main designers for that. And they'd just come off Sleepy Hollow and The Mummy and Star Wars, so they had a lot of experience to bring to the table. That unfortunately, because of the movies that have been shot in Toronto in the last 10 years, the people didn't have that. Like costumes, there's a certain standard of work, but when you get to the next level, people are like, okay, what do we do now? And I said, well, it's like, you do this. Oh, do you? Because they just hadn't done it. They can do it as soon as you tell them how to, but who wants to spend the whole movie showing people what to do?
That's true.
It's better to have people.
You don't have time for it.
Exactly. I mean, I do a lot of the work myself. I sculpted all the makeups on this. I've applied all the makeups. I've done all the mechanics on it. I've done a lot of the painting and a lot of the hair work. So
did you ever work with any of the people who made the puppets for Spitting Image?
I didn't actually know, because the show was ending around the same time as I started getting more into the industry. I'd been in London about 2 years.
Because it strikes me that those people must be incredibly talented.
They are. It was interesting because they're not from a kind of a creature effects background.
That's true.
They're from like an art background.
Yeah, and sometimes a puppetry background.
And exactly, and they had more of theatre, and they had to bring in phone technicians and painters to actually do the work for them from like Henson's,
right.
Places like that.
Now, what if any innovations have you or your teams created, either on this film or other films?
Innovations. I haven't built anything that nobody else has done that would be worth mentioning. You know, I'd come up with a new way of of having a servo move, having a servo mounted into a head, or I'd come up with a new way for myself of coupling batteries together, or a certain way of doing a prosthetic sculpture. Everybody has a different style. The industry right now is split up into two types of teams. There's low budget and there's high budget. The higher budget shows have more money for R&D. So they get a feature, say Jacob's Ladder, Gord Smith, for instance. He spent a year, from what I hear, just testing, just seeing what would look good. I've never spent a year on one movie. Never mind had a year just to do research and development.
Well, he's a bit of an oddball. I've interviewed him, and he's off by himself.
Yeah,
he hates Hollywood people. He'll work for them, but he doesn't harbor any sort of pretensions about what he does.
But his standard of work is very hard to match.
Yeah.
It's very good.
He has created some real innovations. You know how he got into it? He told me this himself. Unfortunately, the magazine didn't print this interview. It was a really good interview, but he had a phobia to blood, because his father died of, I think, leukemia or something when he was young.
He was hired to do an operation, heart operation or something?
I don't know if he was hired. I think he watched operations.
Right.
But he had a background in the theater. He'd done all kinds of different things in the theater, but it became so overwhelming for him that he had to go to therapy, and in his therapy they suggested, be around blood, get used to blood. So he started working with fake blood to start out to work himself up to real blood. And in the meantime, he realized, hey, I can do this. I'm good at this. And he, unbeknownst to everyone, created something that nobody else had created while he was doing this. So
it's a good story. I just got into it because I like monster movies, just like Dick Baker, just like Dick Smith, just like everybody.
Yeah. That's the
usual old-fashioned way. Yeah, exactly.
Now, what would you say was the most difficult challenge for you on this particular?
The creature suit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, once the look of Ginger's transformation, prosthetic transformation, had been agreed on, then it was just a case of just sculpting it, molding it, gluing it on. But there was a lot of trial and error to make sure what was too much, what was too little, and there was a lot of different departments throwing in their ideas. But the costume was really the hardest because it had to be completely self-contained, and he has to walk on all fours. And we've had to extend his legs and extend his arms and do it in such a way so it doesn't change the actor's body, but still keep an actor inside. Normally in this stage you just stretch the body with the computer graphics. I know in American Werewolf in Paris they did some wolves in that, which was CG, and they had a specific look they were going for. With this, we just wanted to keep it as a costume, but it couldn't look like American Werewolf. It couldn't look like The Howling. It couldn't look like anything done before. And I think having a young lady turn into the wolf helped us right from the start, because John's had an image in his head of what he wanted for a number of years now since he wrote the script, so along with Karen. So between them, they were very. All I had to do was really just show him different versions until he found one that matched his idea. So it wasn't really that difficult. Just working the practicalities out was probably the hardest part, because a wolf suit normally you'd think is covered in fur. Well, this young lady's creature isn't. It's mostly skin. It's very emaciated, very albino, very kind of sickly looking, with very little hair. So a lot of the seams you were able to
Sickly
hide.
albino werewolf. There you go. That's
Exactly.
something new.
Yeah.
See, there's an innovation right there.
It's not innovation. It's a different look, I think. Every time you do something makeup-wise, even if it's the same creature for a different movie, you always change it. So each time you build it, there's an innovation. Whether it's really small or really big, just using a different color paint at a different place is an innovation. I haven't got the money or the time to come up with a new product that I can introduce to the industry, or come up with a new type of mechanism and then to the industry. It just isn't the money. There isn't the budget to do that. I'd love to sit there and play for a year, but no one's going to pay me to do that. I have to supply and demand. I have to give people what they pay me for as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Which is something that I found is changing. Is the amount of work that's being given to someone like me is getting more and more. Also, the budgets and the times are getting less. So we're having to produce more work for less money. Whereas computer graphics, because it's still new, they can pretty much say, well, it's going to take a year and it's going to cost you $1 million. And they go, okay, because it's never been done before.
And that's why you think once that is more advanced, then it'll take.
Once they get to a point where they can bring the costs down and the standard of work,
which is
different,
always the reasoning for everything.
But a lot of directors still won't use CG.
Sure.
They say they'll never use CG. Unfortunately, a lot of directors now, a lot of younger directors are coming out of MTV and videos and everything, and
They're used to it.
It's now a tool that's they can use right off the bat. They know
So
what
as
they
the
want.
older directors fade away or die off, it will change.
I think it's really how it's written. If it's written as an optical, it'll be an optical.
Right.
If it's written as a creature, then they'll decide afterwards how it's going to be done.
Right.
With this, John wrote it with a costume in mind. A lot of his actions are there on set. It's very, very practical.
Right.
He didn't want the actors to be acting against the blue screen. Whereas I'm sure George Lucas wrote Star Wars with the actors against the green screen the whole time. It's really how it's decided.
So, first of all, I've talked to Paul Jones, and I'd like to know, irrespective of what he does, what you do, which is a different league.
Well, I'm the head of the makeup department. I handle everything that Paul doesn't tackle as far as the monster stuff.
Right.
Paul looks after the creature suit. He's built it and he handles it, and he looks after the 3-stage prosthetic makeup that Ginger goes through on her way to the suit. So everything else I've handled.
Now, that was a scene that was just being filmed about the piercing. Was that your department there?
Yeah, that was small potatoes, though. I mean, we had all the creature attack stuff that I've dealt with also.
It was stuff that Katie was talking about. She's had a lot of blood all over her. Is that your department as well? And how she's said that she had problems with getting in her eyes, her mouth, and her hair, and all this kind of stuff. Is that a common problem with working with materials of that type?
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of. For continuity purposes, it's hard to keep track of because it's running, it's flowing.
And you're not shooting in
It's not
sequence.
like painting something on that
Right.
stays where it stays static. It actually runs, and somebody touches it, it smears and rubs off on set dressing and props and everything else. So it get a little muddy.
And you're not shooting in sequence, so you have to remember where how much blood was in different scenes and so forth.
Plus, we're using about 3 or 4 different shades of blood in this. So we'll see somebody get hurt, and they'll have we'll see bright red blood come out of the injury, and then we'll see them within the context of the story an hour and a half later, and they haven't been cleaned up yet. So blood's turned a darker color.
Right.
Because blood turns dark once it's out in the air, the open air. So
And how do you manage to keep all that straight?
Polaroids and notes,
Right. And
and as much sleep as I can possibly get.
which, from what people tell me, isn't a lot
Virtually
lately.
impossible. So Polaroids and notes mostly.
So what would you say is the most difficult part of your job on this particular project?
Keeping track of continuity.
Yeah. And how do you help him do what he does?
I bridge actually both departments. I do specialty contact lenses. In regards to, there was a freezer scene yesterday, and Jordan did the makeup on that, and I had like frozen eye, dead eye contact lenses on that.
Right.
And then with Ginger, it's her eyes when she becomes, well, actually throughout all 3 stages, she wears contact lenses. In the first stage, just one contact lens, and then she moves into 2 contact lenses for the second and third stage.
Right.
And they're an ice blue, kind of wolf eye.
So some of them are different colors as well.
It's the same color, it's just
For this
the way
particular...
the whole thing's been designed is that she changes sort of asymmetrically, so one of her hands is clawed first, and then the other one, the claws pop up. And by the time the ones pop up on the left hand, the ones on the right hand are big, long, hooked claws. And at that point, she's got one of her eyes has started to turn a color. And then by the time she gets through the whole process, both of her eyes are turned, and she eventually turns into the suit.
And do you do the claws that she was wearing as well? No.
Paul's team handles that.
Okay.
There's too much to keep track of to handle that. Also, it's it.
How do you manage to coordinate what you do with what he does and not get in each other's way?
We just had to work it out when we started to make sure that we wouldn't trip over one another.
Right.
We would be able to support one another.
Now, do you have also a staff of people working under you as he does, or?
I've had a couple of people in from time to time. It's not. He's got a lot of people in all the time with him to puppeteer the suit.
Right.
The suit's remote controlled. It's an animatronic head. So.
What sort of new materials are people in your business using these days to make things look more realistic?
Well, the blood products have changed a lot. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, that there's, I think generally the fault from my perspective of these types of movies in the past is that it's just one color of blood,
Right.
one note through the whole movie.
So it doesn't look
It never
realistic.
changes, it's all one color, and that's not what blood looks like. And
Right.
I think audiences nowadays are getting a little more, people in general are getting a little more educated just through the media. I mean, you can turn on the Discovery Channel nowadays and watch one of those trauma shows and actually see what blood looks like
Operations,
after an
yeah.
hour and a half of somebody lying in an emergency room, and it doesn't look like it did in the horror movies from the 70s and the early 80s.
Oh, even that recent, eh?
Oh yeah.
What was primarily used for blood in the older?
The same type of thing we're using now, and that there was no attention paid to the detail of blood changing color.
Right.
Or very little anyway.
It's primarily made from what?
It's like a corn syrup based.
Corn syrup still,
based.
yeah. So so that makes it's opaque and thick, and it runs, right? But it's thicker than,
And
say.
it's just tinted with food dyes, but they would only ever make one color up. So you'd see somebody, for instance, they would get attacked by somebody with a hockey mask on, and then you'd see them, within the context of the story, like 3 hours later, hiding in a cabin somewhere, and they would be covered in the same color blood. In reality, that's not what happens. In reality, it's turned quite a dark brown at that point.
Right. And is it different colors of dyes, different shades of dyes that you're using?
And different consistencies too.
And do you have to? Are they pre-made, or do you experiment with that as you
They're
go
pre-made.
along?
Once in a while, we'll horse around with them and mix them up and to get something we really need.
Are there any sort of new innovations in makeup that you or your people have created or
No,
tried out?
there's not really any time for something like that on this. I mean, we're always coming up with tricks and ways to pull things off, but I think a lot of the time, the tricks that we come up with in this business don't necessarily have so much to do with what you see, it's with what you don't see. And what I mean by that is that, it's not what we're using, it's how we use it. It's how we find a way to get something on and off of an actor fast, or how we find a way to reset something quickly.
What about the safety of the makeup materials themselves? Because of course, in the old days, there was many hazardous chemicals used in these things. How has that changed?
No, I mean there's still a lot of solvent-based products, but it's not the same. It's not the same as it used to be. I mean, there was a lot of the old Hollywood makeup artists that had big problems with their liver and their kidneys and things like that because they were washing their hands with acetone and things like that. Doesn't happen anymore. We're a lot more conscious.
And there were lead-based and copper-based facial makeups and stuff like that, and body makeups.
It's pretty strictly watched nowadays. So.
Yeah, it's across the board in
I mean,
any
but
department.
I think by the very fact that I'm sitting here beside Pam doing this interview with you is a testament to that, because I think in the early 80s and the late 70s, I don't think it would have been unusual to see somebody in my capacity or Paul's capacity monkeying around with contact lenses, which are technically a medical device and should be handled by somebody who has that training. So by the very virtue of the fact that Pam's sitting here, I think is a testament to that.
And did you have any sort of like optical?
Yeah, I studied
experience?
optics, and then I sold contact lenses for 7 years, and then ended up in the film business because I was creatively starved, never thinking that I'd do anything optically again, and
Right.
here I am.
Wow.
So I mean, I wouldn't do lenses on the show. I wouldn't bring lenses into a makeup on the show unless I knew that Pam was going to be there.
Because that's a specialized area, right?
Definitely. I mean, like Pam has said, I mean, they're a medical device.
Yeah.
Well, and interestingly enough, I mean, it seems like 90% of the actors that are cast for roles that require contact lenses are non-contact lens wearers.
Sure.
It's funny how that works out. Yeah.
It's crazy, even the girl that Jordan did last night in the Frozen makeup, she was quite, she had to be calmed down, after the contact lenses were in, just to let her know that everything was okay. She was in a freezer, like hamburger and corn kernels packed around her, and then, frozen makeup on top of her, and then contact lenses on top of that, and then the freezer
Oh, it's
lid.
very pleasant to be in a horror movie.
It was quite nasty. I mean, she was literally pasted into the side of the freezer. I mean, the product that I used on her is like a very thick, viscous kind of gel, and it's clear. It looks like ice.
Right.
It's great.
And so I literally sort of troweled her right into the freezer. She was buried in the freezer essentially in this stuff with frozen food packed in around her, and that was dressed with the same product, so that there was some sort of a uniformity and continuity in the inside of the freezer. And then on top of it, she had this all over her face, she had her hair and her eyes everywhere, and then on top of it she's got contact lenses put in that rendered her virtually blind. So it's a big help to me to have somebody like Pam here.
So how do you go
Because of
about
that.
reassuring somebody who's going through that kind of mess?
Breathe, because in most cases people stop breathing. When you are frightened,
You hold your
you
breath.
hold your breath, and so then you go into shock,
Oh, really?
panic.
Really?
Yeah.
I never even
because-
thought of that.
Yeah, because then the adrenaline rushes into your body, and you go into survival mechanism.
Right.
So it's interesting just to even see them when I say breathe, take a breath, because
Didn't realize that they hadn't been breathing
No.
properly.
Wow.
So it's nice, I can deal with the discomfort she's going through physically with the makeup, and I know that I don't have to worry about the contact lenses because Pam's here, and Pam can talk her through that element of it.
Well, that's great. Now, is there anything else we have to cover? Any particular anecdotes on this particular shoot that were unforeseen problems? Where you had to make snap decisions to change what you were originally going to do?
Can you think of any you guys into? Anecdotes? Can you think of any? Curveballs that happen?
There's always in your department, Jordan. It's just that, you think
The
on
what?
your feet.
Barf, when you were like, she shouldn't be making the noise, she should just be spitting. That was good.
Yeah.
It's a daily thing
It
for
happens
you.
every day. There's something,
Yeah.
I
But
think it's
you're very quick on your...
I guess you don't even remember them after a while, you just move on.
extinguishes them
Yeah.
that fast.
you need to be able to think on your feet to do this job.
Right.
You need to understand. It's not just an understanding of my department. I need to understand how the whole machine works. So, the incident that she's citing is, this character she had her mouth covered up. She was being sort of held across the face, and she ends up throwing up. And what was happening was that we can only put so much of this stuff in her mouth. It's like vomit, and which is really just egg white and separated eggs. We used egg white and oatmeal, and you can only fit so much in your mouth before you'll actually gag.
Yeah.
And what she was trying to do was she was trying to sort of simulate throwing up. So she was making gagging sounds and heaving sounds and trying to convulse like somebody does when they hang up. And it wasn't working, and I finally said to her, I cleared it with the director first to go and obviously step in across that line, and I said, don't bother, just concentrate on forcing this stuff out of your mouth, because all of those sounds that you're making and all of that carry-on that you're doing can all be put in post. It can all be done in sound effects in post. You don't have to do that. It worked out fine. I mean, that's a small example of the kind of stuff that happens. I can't think of anything else in my head now. And you?
Not that it's just that you have a vast amount of knowledge, so you can give that out to the director and whomever else. I mean, oftentimes you're shooting with a director that's inexperienced in special effects, so then the special effects artists become, an important part of the process because they have the knowledge that the director requires.